is 2 a.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Conn-young. This is ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Now, we're going to begin this Monday afternoon with a nationwide rail strike now in its 22nd day. There have been a number of new developments since this morning that could bring an end to the conflict between the state-run railway operator KORAIL and the railway union. We have on the phone ARIRANG News Kim Hyun-bin. Now, Hyun-bin, what's the latest on that front?
As you mentioned, Conn-young, the strike has continued for 22 days, making it the longest railway strike in Korea. Over the weekend, thousands of union members protested in downtown Seoul, and there were few signs of the strike dying down. But there's some good news. Union leaders have promised to call off the strike after the country's two main rival parties agreed to form a parliamentary subcommittee under the Transport Ministry. The formation of the committee was one of 5 changes the union asked for during talks with KORAIL last Thursday. The committee will deal with issues related to improving the management of the nation's railways without privatizing railway services. Privatization is the main point of contention for the union, which says the government's plan to form a subsidiary to run a new bullet train line is actually the first step toward privatizing rail services in the future, a charge the government has denied. The parliamentary committee will have an equal number of members from each of the 2 main rival parties, but it will be headed by someone from the ruling Saenuri party. The union said it will release its formal position on the matter this afternoon after looking over the agreement.
Now, Hyun-bin, there still are some union members who are wanted by the local authorities. Now, what's going to happen to them?
Well, despite this new development, the police say there's no change with regard to the charges against the union members. The police says issued arrest warrants for 6 more union members on Monday, bringing the total number of members wanted by the police to 31. 2 union members are currently in detention, and 1 is being questioned after having been taken into police custody.
All right, thanks, Hyun-bin, for that. That was our Kim Hyun-bin reporting on the 22nd day of the railway strike, and he will keep us updated all throughout the day. Now, as our Kim Hyun-bin just reported, Korean railway workers have decided to end the longest rail strike in history after the ruling and opposition parties agreed to set up a parliamentary subcommittee on banning rail privatization. Now, this 22 days after more than 8,700 KORAIL workers walked off the job on December 9th in protest against the government's move to open a new subsidiary, which the rail union feared will result in privatization and layoffs. Now, for a more in-depth look at this issue, we're joined live on the line by Dr. Kim Byung-ju, head of KLMP Consulting, and of course, our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
So, the surprising agreement, overnight agreement, how did the National Assembly lead the process?
Right. We believe that the whole process of the National Assembly and political parties intervening in this case and leading to the final resolution of it began last Friday. What happened was the Railway Workers Union's Secretary General Chun Seol actually entered the DUP party headquarters and asked for help, and DUP, its Secretary General Park Ki-chun was chosen as the main player in trying to resolve this case. And what happened was this: Mr. Park actually contacted Mr. Kim Hyun-bin, who is a member of the Land and Transportation Committee of the National Assembly, and together these 2, leading lawmakers, Park Ki-chun at DUP and Saenuri's Kim Hyun-bin, they are both political heavyweights, and they try to work out deals together with the participation of the Secretary General of the Railway the union himself. And in the meantime, while they were dealing with working out all the details of this agreement that was just announced, that they were, especially Kim Hyun-bin himself, the lawmaker at the ruling party himself, was staying close touch with the ruling party's leadership itself and also presidential office, he explained, and they were sharing all the details. And what happened was last night around midnight they got the signature from the head of the railway union himself, and then they got to the final agreement. What was surprising about the whole process was it was progressing in total secrecy, and nobody really knew about it other than the directly involved members. So that's why we got this real big surprise today.
Now, Dr. Kim, how do we explain this sudden end of the longest rail strike in the nation's history? I mean, was it due to the government's hardline policy or response, or would you say it's due to a public opinion turning against the railway workers?
Yeah, I think those were all key reasons, perhaps. And what we were watching was actually many different parties, even including the religious leaders and the political leaders, got involved at the end. So, adding more players usually to make situations more complex. But this time, I think it helped actually resolving it all together. And, as the voices of the religious leaders and then also the politicians were being raised, I think more people found the way to actually resolve the situation altogether. Of course, we have to admit that government's hardline response itself actually made a difference, indeed, whether we like it or not. And overall, the return of the workers after the hardline position was announced by the KORAIL management itself increased big time. Usually, based on our past experience, what we say is about 30% of the return ratio is the key threshold over which any kind of strike, railroad strike at least, based on our experience, will have to be closed. And that threshold was being reached very close today. And so we got to see once again that 30% threshold was the key point. And then as more of the rail workers were returning to work, the union itself could not go on. Also, we have to point out the overall public opinion itself was leaning towards the government. Close to 60% of the people, according to 중앙일보 survey that was conducted last Friday and Saturday, based upon 1,000 people here, were showing that 60% of the people were leaning toward supporting the government position as a whole, and that they were criticizing the union, and the overall strike itself is not acceptable. So that change of public opinion, for sure, it was also playing a key role here.
Now, I suppose now the question is, how will the government and KORAIL deal with the aftermath of this strike? I mean, will all of the workers on strike be allowed to come back to work? Our Kim Hyun-bin just reported that those wanted by the police will still be wanted by the police.
Right. Looks like that seems to be the official situation at this point. And the police and the prosecutors, public prosecutor's office, as well as KORAIL, they are not backing down in terms of becoming more lenient because this agreement has been reached. We will wait and see for the final results itself, because in the past, of course, usually official, the action for reprimanding these workers were put on the front, on the surface, but however, final results were different. So we'll have to wait and see on this one. But however, this time, the hardline position may remain in place for a longer time than before, because the KORAIL, the management and also government has emphasized the hardline position much more than before. So it will be difficult for the government and the KORAIL to back down. But of course, the overall public opinion will be a critical factor here in terms of what the final result will have to be. And of course, KORAIL will be in a difficult situation, not accepting the workers coming back anyway. So we'll need more time in making judgment on this that question.
Of course, we should always come out with something from every conflict. What are some of the key lessons that this country can gain from this experience?
A lot of observers seem to believe that the reason for the strike itself was not a very optimal choice that was made by the union itself. It was not about their pay. It was not about their working condition. It's not about their maintaining livelihood. It was about privatization, which government repeatedly said was not happening. So that part was a critical mistake, strategic mistake, it looks like, according to many of the observers here. So in the future, some big lessons for the labor union and the workers who, fight for or demand improvement of their working conditions and so on. I think it will be an important lesson for that. And also important, turning point in terms of public opinion or Korean people thinking about the privatization issue as a whole. And of course, for sure, we need more time to sort out public opinion. But it was an important turning point and a critical moment for Korean people to think about the issue of privatization as a whole. And also another issue about the reforming the public corporations was also a very key issue that was raised this time, which I think made a positive point in terms of more people thinking about the issue as a whole. And lastly, on the government side, of course, looks like the final outcome seems to support government position that has been maintained the whole time. But I think government should recognize the public demand on in the process where critics were saying government should do a better job explaining important issues with the people, important issues to the people, and having better communication with the public itself is important, and government needs to definitely improve on that side.
All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, our regular Business Today commentator here on our studio, and we'll see you back here in the new year.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from those abroad.
Now, at the National Assembly, the 2014 budget bill has still not made it onto the list of bills to be processed in a plenary session today. The biggest sticking point has to do with the addition of a clause in the bill on reforming the National Intelligence Service. The clause bans NIS agents from having full access to government offices and media outlets. The main opposition Democratic Party is asking that the ban be put into law to prohibit illegal information gathering activities. While the ruling Senate Party is opposed to the idea, saying the ban will limit NIS agents' intelligence gathering ability. Last week, the leaders of the rival parties agreed to pass the 2014 budget bill and the NIS reform bill this Monday, but it looks increasingly less likely that the National Assembly will be able to pass the two bills anytime today. Meanwhile, Korea and China agreed to seek ways to deal with the global uncertainties rising from the economic downturn in emerging countries at their 12th finance ministers meeting in Seoul this Monday. Well, during the two sides' first of such meetings since Presidents Park Geun-hye and Xi Jinping took office, Korean Finance Minister Hyun Woo-seok and his Chinese counterpart Su Xiaoxi agreed to strengthen cooperation in times of economic uncertainty. Seoul and Beijing also agreed to jointly respond to climate change and increase cooperation on green technology and industry, energy conservation, and environmental protection. Korea's current account surplus is set to reach a record high this year. The Bank of Korea says the current account had surpassed the $64 billion mark in the January to November period, far above last year's $48 billion. The central bank adds last month's surplus was at slightly above $6 billion, marking the 22nd month in a row that the nation's current account stayed in the black. While still, the figure was lower than the $7.5 billion recorded in the same month last year, as well as the all-time monthly high of $9.5 billion posted in October this year. Now, this is mainly because of low performance by the service sector, which logged a deficit in November, which, according to the BOK, is typical for this time of year. And this is how the markets closed on this last trading day of 2013. Korean shares closed at their highest level in 4 weeks today, posting an annual gain of 0.7%, driven by bargain hunting in auto and banking stocks. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi finished up nearly 0.5% at 2011, which is its highest close since December 2nd. The tech-heavy Kosdaq also ended the year nearly 0.7% higher, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency closed weaker against the greenback at 1,055 won. Now, Korean stock markets will be closed Tuesday and Wednesday for the New Year's holiday and reopen an hour later than usual on Thursday to kick off trading in 2014. Now, while Wall Street kept setting records, the Korean stock market performed rather poorly this year. Our UDN gives us the scorecard for the Seoul Bourse.
The Korea Composite Stock Price Index fell slightly this year by about 1.5%. The fall was largely because of poor performance by Samsung Electronics, which account for about a fifth of the Seoul Bourse's total market capitalization. The tech giant saw its stock price fall by about 7.5% this year. Share analysts say although Samsung Electronics have reported record profits and sales this year, foreign investors started selling the stocks in June, when worse than expected smartphone sales called into question the company's future. Experts attribute the share market fall to poor results by many struggling domestic companies, particularly in the construction and shipping industries. A Daeshin Securities report highlights Naver Corporation, Korea's biggest search portal operator, as this year's star player on the stock market. Buoyed by a success of its mobile messenger service called Line, the company saw its share value rise by over 100% this year. That pushed up Naver to the 6th most valuable company listed on this whole market, from 14th at the beginning of the year. Foreigners emerged as the most influential investors this year, as many local individual investors fled the market. Mounting household debts also made it difficult for individual investors to invest in shares. The disposable income to household debt ratio is hovering around a high of 140%. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
Now, shifting our focus, President Park Geun-hye has criticized Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for his recent visit to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, saying she hopes there will not be any more incidents in the new year that demolish the trust between the two countries. Speaking at a meeting with her top secretaries Monday morning, she urged the Japanese government to stop opening up old wounds from Japan's colonial rule of Korea. The president said that should Japan continue to exhibit behavior that goes against universal values and standards, it will not receive high marks from other countries, even if its economy is doing well. Abe visited the shrine, which honors convicted war criminals along with the country's war dead, on Thursday, drawing immediate criticism from Japan's regional neighbors. Now, Korea-Japan relations are strained to a point not seen in years following Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit last week to a war shrine that honors Japan's war dead and several Class A war criminals. And it looks like relations could plunge to new lows in the new year as a number of events are planned that will send fresh chills through the already frosty relations. Kim Min-ji has more.
Relations between Seoul and Tokyo are at one of the worst levels of the post-war era following Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's highly controversial visit last week to the Yasukuni War Shrine. And with several unfavorable events in store for next year, the icy relations are unlikely to thaw anytime soon. The first event is a Takashima Day, which takes place in Japan's Shimane Prefecture each year in February, claiming sovereignty over the Korea-controlled Dokdo Islets. This past February, the Abe administration sent government officials to the event for the first time, drawing sharp criticism from Korea. In March, Japan will announce the screening results of its history textbooks, while Tokyo is expected to unveil its diplomatic blue paper and defense white paper in April and July, respectively. As Japan continues to claim sovereignty over Dokdo, these events will almost certainly negatively affect the relations. It is also unclear whether Abe will make a second visit to the Yasukuni War Shrine during the April Spring Festival. Seoul's foreign ministry reacted strongly to Abe's visit last week, expressing its deep regret and anger. Another event which could ignite tensions is a ruling by Korea's Supreme Court ordering Japanese companies to compensate Korean victims of forced labor during Japan's colonial rule of Korea in the early 1900s. Making matters worse, if the case is taken to the International Court of Justice, it could expand into a diplomatic conflict. Moreover, Japan's continuous push for collective self-defense has also set the two countries against each other. The Korean government has been doing its best to convince its allies against supporting Japan's move to regain its right to collective self-defense, which would allow Tokyo to use force in the event an ally is attacked. Meanwhile, reports say that the Korean government will postpone all defense meetings and diplomatic exchanges with Japan for the time being. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
North Korea's purge of aides close to the uncle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who was executed earlier this month, appears to be ongoing. Seoul's Unification Minister Lee Kil-jae said Monday during a meeting at the National Assembly that the purge of aides to Chang Song-taek, formerly the North's de facto #2, is presumed to be ongoing. Now, he said the ministry has detected signs that personnel related to Chang are still being purged and added that although it is too soon to describe the events in detail, the purge is believed to be in progress on a smaller scale. Well, Chang, often described as the second most powerful man in the North, was executed for allegedly trying to overthrow the government. "17 people have been killed after a suicide bomber detonated explosives at a Russian train station. This latest attack has Russia on edge just weeks before the start of the Winter Olympics in Sochi. Kwon So-hwa reports.
Security has been stepped up at train stations and airports around Russia after a suspected female suicide bomber attacked Volgograd train station Sunday, killing at least 17 people and injuring scores more. Russian investigators say the bomber detonated explosives in front of a metal detector just inside the main entrance of the station that was bustling with holiday travelers.
According to our information, a female suicide bomber approached the metal detector, saw a policeman there, got nervous and detonated the bomb. It could have been worse if the bomber passed through into the waiting hall, as the explosion was the equivalent of 10 kilograms of TNT.
This is the second such attack in the same city in recent months, following a bus bombing in October that killed 8, including the Islamist attacker. While the bomber's identity has still to be confirmed and more than one person could have been involved, female suicide bombers, known as Black Widows, the family members of dead insurgents, have carried out a number of attacks in nearby Muslim regions conflicting with the Russian administration. Volgograd is only a few hundred kilometers northeast of Sochi, raising security concerns ahead of the Winter Olympics, which kick off in February. Kwon So-hwa, ARIRANG News.
And with the shock of a deadly bomb attack in Volgograd on Sunday still fresh, a second deadly blast hit the Russian city on Monday, killing at least 10 people and injuring 23 others. State investigators have called Monday's explosion on a trolley bus a terrorist act. A state-run news agency reported the roof of the trolley bus was blown off and debris was scattered on the streets. The two consecutive attacks are raising safety concerns and come 40 days before Russia is scheduled to host the Winter Olympics in Sochi, less than 1,000 kilometers from Volgograd. Now, 2014 is on the horizon, and many Koreans are planning to ring in the new year at famous winter destinations on the Korean peninsula. Jeju Island is among the hottest spots, but with thousands of tourists flocking to the southern island every day, hotel rooms and airline seats are in short supply. Son Jung-in reports.
It's the last week of the year, and another wave of tourists has just arrived at Jeju International Airport. They're part of the 25,000 daily visitors Jeju Island has been receiving during the winter holiday season. Jeju has become a hot destination for those looking to celebrate the end of the year at one of Korea's leading vacation spots.
This week, many climbers, hikers, and leisure sports tourists are seeking out Mount Halasan's snowy landscapes, and many families are coming in this weekend as well.
However, if you're looking to book a last-minute trip to Jeju, you may want to plan carefully. Hotels, condominiums, and other rental accommodations here are reporting that up to 80% of their vacancies have already been booked. Rental car dealerships say bookings are limited, with over half of their vehicles signed out. But for those who are able to make the trek, the spectacular scenic views are sure to take your breath away. The annual festival, held on top of Jeju's famous Hongsan Ilchulbong, or Sunrise Peak, is expected to draw in large crowds on New Year's Eve.
We're extending the festival this year by 1 day for a 3-day, 2-night event. We've established a variety of programs, including traditional weddings for foreigners, trips to World Natural Heritage Sites, and others.
Whether you're visiting Jeju or in the capital city of Seoul, special events across the country will be welcoming the first sunrise of 2014 with warm wishes and united cheers. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
And here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to ARIRANG. We have a lot more coming your way, an early edition at 6.